Hey guys, into the end here, back with another video for constructed decks, and I have a super spicy list for you today. Um, it's yet another attempt to make Divining Rod work. I don't know what I don't know what it is about this card. It's pretty crappy. I failed every time that I try to make this card work, yet I keep coming back to it. I don't know, I'm like a drug addict that just can't get enough of this stupid, stupid card. But I love it. And this time, we're gonna use it with a whole bunch of deadly units. And the idea for this deck is inspired by an opponent that I ran into a couple of days ago, F300 Zen. His version splashes blue for a whole bunch of blue cards that has like crush that the 8 power 3/4 blue unit, blue black unit that kills everything with 3 power or less and stuns everything else with deadly. His deck has that with Vera, and I think that's too many 8 drops in a deck. So I've chosen to steer away from the blue version that he had. I actually don't have his deck list, so I can't share it with you. Maybe I'll message him later and ask him for a deck list if you're interested in the 3-color version. But so basically, I just want to make sure I give credit to where I got my inspiration. This player right here, F300 Zen. This deck is so much fun to play, guys. Every single unit in this deck has deadly, so Divining Rod will hit any unit you play. And the funny thing is, with the other versions of the deck where I had Charge and I think Overwhelm, there are a lot of really bad Charge and Overwhelm units that we force fit into the deck, or even units that are really high curved that really shouldn't be there just to make Divining Rod work. But in this deck, all of the deadly units we play are very good, and they're actually perfectly curved. So you don't have, like with the Charge deck, there's like Icaria, Caleb, all these things on the 7 and 8 drop slot. This one, not so much. You have a very strong defensive early game, a pretty strong mid game, and an incredibly strong late game. So this deck actually has a lot of potential, and I've played quite a few games with this deck. And it's been performing quite well. The games where you go off, you really go off. And with games where you lose, you don't feel like it's a hopeless match. And one of the reasons for that is because Deadly is such a powerful mechanic. It doesn't matter what your opponent's playing. If they're playing giant units, if they're building a 2020 Mystic Ascendant, if they're playing Sandstorm Titans, Heart of the Vault, none of it matters because every one of your units can block every one of their units. And it's always going to be a 1-for-1 trade. And if you do a whole bunch of 1-for-1 trade, eventually when you hit a Divining Rod or a Vera, you're going to come back on top. It is a little bit weak in the air. We only have, we have 8 ways to block air units and then a removal spell, so it's not horrendous in the air. But if you don't draw the right removal and they have a removal spell for your first couple of copies of Wasps, then they do end up hitting you for a lot in the air. So let's go through the individual card choices a little bit. Starting at the 1-drop slot, we have Dark Return and Seek Power. The Dark Return serves quite a few different functions in this deck. One, it serves as a pseudo removal spell, and the reason for that is because when you put Xenan Initiation onto units like Steward of the Past, Ashara, and Lumen Defender, very often you're going to be able to killer something without losing your unit. And if your opponent ever manages to kill it with a removal spell, using Dark Return, bringing these units back with Killer, it's basically going to get you another. It's going to get you another unit killed for free, usually. And if you have Zenith Initiation on Azura, there's nothing in this game that can survive that attack, that killer trigger. So it serves as a pseudo removal spell, gives you some extra gas, bringing back useful units. But ultimately, though, what this is really for is it's like basically Vera copy 4, 5, and 6. And this card will, between 3 Vera Fate Touch and 3 more Dark Returns, this gives you a maximum of 6 copies of Vera. And I don't think there's any decks out there that can grind out 6 copies of Vera. Seek Power is just, I mean, it's just I would like a low curve mana fixing. You could use Amber Acolyte instead. You can use Tillier's Favored. But I chose Seek Power because I would like to be able to play something on turn 1. Wasp is pretty self-explanatory. It's a fantastic blocker. It's 2 to play. It's good against aggressive decks. It's good against all mid-range decks as well. You know, this can trade with a Predatory Cranosaur. This can trade with this will survive a Heart of the Vault 2 damage trigger and then block with it. So this card's very solid on the defense. 3 Find a Way. So you do need a lot of power in this deck because you want to hit 6 power and then 8 power very reliably. So between Seek Power, Find a Way, and Vera's Favor, this should allow us to not miss any land drops. Although Find a Way is quite slow because you get the depleted lands. 3 copies of Xenan Initiation, I've already mentioned this before. It works very well with your very high toughness deadly units. Banish is a versatile removal spell that gets rid of a lot of relics that you care about these days, specifically Chalice you care a lot about, and Xenan Obelisk you care a lot about as well. Cat Burglar, it's got Deadly. It's a 3 power unit. It trades, attacks fairly well, so it's actually pretty good. And it's also pretty good for the curve. You know, you have 2 drops, and then you have some 3 drops, and then you have some 4 drops and 5 drops. So it's pretty decent on the curve as well. And once in a while, you'll snag some kind of Chalice or Obelisk away from your opponent's hand, and that's just icing on the cake. Even without the summon ability, this card is still okay in this deck. For Scorpion Wasp, this acts as both removal and it acts as a Divining Rod target. So unfortunately, this is the only Lumen Defender and Scorpion Wasp are the only 2 units in this deck that you cannot recur with Vera. So that's a little bit unfortunate, but it's still a very good unit, especially because with this deck, we don't have a lot of removal spells, and we also don't have any relic weapons. We do need some ways to deal with units that have Aegis. Although with that said, technically every single unit can deal with units with Aegis because they have Deadly on it. But this is a surprise, so they would attack into it. For Death Strike, it's your only removal spell other than Xenan Initiation and Bandit. Oh, I guess you have 3 removal spells. It's your only unconditional removal spell, whereas both of the other removal spells are conditional. Steward, Deadly, fits with the theme of the deck, an amazing blocker, a decent enough attacker, and with it in play, you get rid of all opposing void shenanigans. A very good card. This is I think, card that is underplayed. This card can attack into any unit in the game. In fact, this card is impossible to block. You need to block this card with 7 units if you want to kill it on combat, which would never happen. You don't care if your opponent has Cranosaurs, Heart of the Vault, Sandstorm Titans, Impending Dooms. None of these cards matter. When you have a Tavern with a bunch of weapons on it, it doesn't matter. This card will hit you for 6. So this card actually closes out games really fast. The only drawback with this card is that it dies to Torch. And I think that's one of the main reasons why it's not seeing a lot of play. Because you don't want to spend 5 power and then lose it to your opponent's 1 power. But because we have Vera Fate Touch to bring it back, we don't care too much that it dies. And this is just one of the most powerful threats you can play. And the fact that it has no evasion doesn't really matter because no one's going to really be blocking this thing anyway. And if they block, it wouldn't be for very long. They would lose their blocker every time. Lumen Defender is a good catch-up mechanism when you're falling behind, and this deck does happen to fall behind quite often. But with Lumen Defenders, it's a fantastic blocker. You gain some life. Maybe get yourself out of burn range if against aggressive red decks. And of course, the Divining Rod is the card that we sort of made this whole deck around. And then Fair Fate Touch will give you the late game sustainability to basically grind out any match unless they somehow manage to silence it. And that's pretty much it. I've chosen not to play any monuments because I need to hit 6 and 8 mana really badly, and I don't want to risk playing Amber Monuments because a random 5/5 Overwhelm isn't even that important to me in this deck. So some ways to improve this deck or change this deck, I could include 4 copies of Xenan Obelisk and put in 4 copies of Auric Interrogator. I think that is definitely another version of the deck I would love to try at some point. But right now, this is the one I'm running with, and I've had decent amount of success. But this deck is one of the most fun decks I've played in the last little while. And that's in consideration, and that's considering I've been messing around with like Mind Link decks and infinite combo decks. Yet this deck is super fun. I don't know, there's just something about Divining Rod that I just love. So I have been recording gameplay videos with this deck off and on over the last day or two. So when I show you the gameplay videos later, they're not linear. They don't all happen in the same time. So they happen in small chunks. There may be some very small variations in the deck itself. Like if I tweak the number of cards, maybe trying out a new card, 1 or 2 copies of a new card, but the core of the deck doesn't change very much. If I do have a gameplay video where the deck is slightly different, I will post the different deck lists in the description of each video. If you don't see a deck list, then it's the same deck. And I will be recording the games in chunks of 2 to 3 games. So just be aware that they do happen in different time and across different days. As always, thank you very much for watching. If you like this kind of content, give me a subscribe or give me a thumbs up or a like. And subscribe to my channel if you're interested. For those of you who are new to the channel, we spend the first couple of weeks to 3 weeks of every month just brewing around with fun, interesting decks and try to make janky lists competitive. And in the final 2 weeks or so of the month, I would then try and climb ladder, and then I'll be using some more real tier 1 competitive decks if that's more up your alley. Thanks for watching, guys.